So about a year ago I started this project based on Jedi Fallen Order where I wanted to build the giant Imperial refinery that we see on Kashyyyk. And yeah, there's been some ups and some downs, but we're finally here at the finale. There's a couple of things I have to finish off, and then I'm going to go through every single detail and small subtle reference that I put into my giant 50,000 plus Lego piece build. Let's get started. So the first thing I'm going to do is basically build a lid to go on this section which will house the lights. Firstly laid out a rough border for what I wanted to build, completely filled it in all around, and began to build up a base around it. I ensured the dark bluish grey was all the way around the outside in the areas that you would see, and used colourful bricks as always on the inside for filler. And then I used this LED light strip and strung it through to get an even distribution of lights. Okay, so the hallway is fully lit up now. You can see it's looking really good. They're a little bit finicky. I need to sort of get it perfect. I don't know why sometimes they keep turning off. Probably because of the battery pack. I might try and run a wire down to the plug down there instead. So now with the template and the base level inserted, I raised it up by a few levels more, ensuring it's nice and strong and creating a nice layer for me to build off of. For this I began tiling everything off, including adding a few extra details on top, like a few vents and antennas. And I think the top section turned out really nicely with a small slope on the outside and some details on top. I quickly went back to the build and prepped the top section, adding in a layer of tiles for it to rest on. Boom, that's really coming together now. All we have to do is basically remove these base plates here, work up here, across, and then work on the two sections over here and this final platform, and we're done. Now I turn my attention to the front section of the mock. I had this entire bit of rock work to finish off, and as you guys know if you've built Lego before, this type of thing takes absolutely ages. But we boshed it out and managed to get it all the way up to the top level here, where we could start to work on some sections in the back. I ran into so many problems in these sections, so you can see I'm constantly adding stuff and taking it back off again. I also had this tiny small gap that you could semi-see the very colourful bricks underneath, so I went back in and replaced all of these with black bricks. This took me ages, but it was the least of my woes for the next couple of days. As moving on to the second and adjacent section, I ran into so many more problems. I basically repeated the process that I did on the other side, although potentially I was rushing things and it might not have been quite as organised. But we had a few levels that weren't quite flat and a few things that weren't quite straight, so I ended up going back in and ripping apart this entire section, spending even more hours on this build trying to fix this. However, what seemed like a giant problem in my head ended up actually not being too bad, and in the end I got past it, flattened off this top section and started adding some details to the top. On the top of the rockwork section I blended in the roof with this small mud patch where bits of shrubbery and grass are growing, and I continued the roof pattern over onto the next section, although I must have been half asleep this day as I slightly messed up the pattern, and you can see me changing it here. Now I recently moved this entire mock over from my old house to my new house. However, there were a couple of sections I still had to go back and pick up, so I quickly went and wrapped those up and brought them over so the entire mock was ready to go. There were a few tiny things I had to add and change into this main section here. I added in a few extra lights and then finished off the sections to the right and left of this main wall. Now all that's left to do is add some foliage like I have done over there to these two base plates here and finish this landing pad. For this flat platform I added in a few splashes of mud as well as a few studs that I could stand minifigures on, and I then moved on to the plant section, which is something I've been really looking forward to, and added in small bunches of foliage across the entire two base plates. Now with that done, it's just time to add some minifigs. And with that, Kashyyyk is fully finished. I'm so glad to finally have this mock complete. It has pretty much been a year in the making and I'm so happy with the final product. But I've got to say I think this will be the last time I tackle a large project like this. But let's go through all the different details and check everything out in a nice in-depth look. So the first section I created over here was this small landing platform. You see Cal and the Mantis arrive on this section here obviously. You can see I've set this up as a pretty much working base, so Cal and everyone else haven't arrived, the rebels aren't here, but we'll get a little Easter egg of Cal over there in just a minute. The lights don't show up too well on camera, but we do have some nice landing platform lights as well as this light here and a light inside of there where we can see one of the purge troopers emerging. When you arrive on the base you actually crash an 8080 over in this corner here. Obviously again that hasn't happened just yet, but we can see some troops arriving here. Every stormtrooper in this mock has nice printed arms from Firestar Toys, and we even have a couple of other custom figs like this Incinerator Trooper also from Firestar Toys. Over here these guys are overseeing a Wookiee doing some work, and we have some enchained Wookiees being led over to the front of the base ready to be put into their prison cells, which I'll show you in just a second. And we've got a few Imperials monitoring them, ensuring that they get over there safely and don't try anything crazy. I've got to say this section was probably one of my favourite sections to work on. I had a ton of fun building this giant landing platform, and I think the ramp turned out really nicely as well. Over here we have another patrol with an officer leading a couple of stormtroopers, and you can see that leads us up to the actual base wall. Now this was a giant construction and a pretty big part of the project. I really didn't know how I was going to do this for the longest time, but I'm so glad I finished it now. We have a slice of rock work running up this side here. I wish I'd incorporated a few bits of light bluish grey because I think that would have distinguished it a bit more from the dark bluish grey wall, but still I think it looks pretty good. Up on top of the base we have a patch of dirt with a scout trooper sort of watching out, and that seamlessly leads us into the actual top of the base. I think the walls turned out really nicely, and overall seeing this section of the mock finally completed brings me so much happiness. But arguably my favourite part of the mock is this entrance right here. We have a stormtrooper and an officer coming out the front of the base, and overall the entrance was just really nicely designed in my opinion. We have an arrow leading into the entrance, and of course to make the landing platform a little bit nicer we have a few splatters of mud and some small details across the model. There's a small glimpse into what we'll see inside of the base right there, but hopefully I'll be able to show you this a bit better later on. The final part of this platform is the few things that I've added, including these Imperial cargo crates that we see in the game. I really like the way these came out, and this beautiful TIE fighter model here by Brick Vault, and we also have this small ladder where the TIE pilots can climb climb up and work on their ships. But this TIE fighter doesn't just belong to anyone. We can see stepping out of it is Trilla, aka the second sister, and she's on a mission to hunt down and kill Cal Kestis. This is a seriously beautiful minifigure and I had to include it in this mock. Now that's the first section done, but moving over the divide onto the second half of the mock. We have the internal sections of the base as well as where the main section of the battle is taking place. I mean, it's a battle, but Cal Kestis is kind of outnumbered, but we'll get to him in just a second. So on this side of the base wall, we can see into the prison cells. You can see a few Wookiees here being escorted into their cells, and turning the lights to red in this hallway makes it even more ominous. But one thing I've really loved since building this corridor is this view all the way along. I will remove this top section in a bit and give you a better look into the center, but going along here you can get a kind of glimpse into what's in there, just a load of prison cells, and then through there behind that scout trooper is the entrance to the base and the command station I built in the last episode. For the roof I didn't go with too many details. We have a few studs exposed as well as a nice tiled effect. We have a couple of sort of air conditioning units, sort of generator sort of things up on top, as well as this small building here leaning against the wall, and then this small antenna sort of pylon thing here. I think I did a good job breaching the gap between this inside and the outside section. Now one of the coolest things when you go to Kashyyyk on Jedi Fallen Order is these massive sap vats and the battles that you have over the top of them, and that is what this section here represents. You can see the Imperial command station continues onto here, and below it we have a nice corridor with a couple of figures in there. There are some nice details on the back wall, however it is a bit hard to show you that. Then we have this giant back wall across here. I had a lot of fun building this section up. The lower corridor continues over here, and we have another section of the command station up in the top here. And now down here we have the sort of pipes and sections that you sort of balance across and have to fight the different scout troopers on. This center section does move, but I bet these guys are going to go flying when I do move it. Yep. What was I expecting? But yeah, for me these levels on top of these spinning platforms were really iconic in the game and I had to include them, and I think they turned out really nicely with this Purge Trooper battling against Cal. And of course the Scout Trooper coming in to help out. And this other Scout Trooper who's unfortunately toppled in and is clinging onto this pipe for dear life. If you've ever built anything in Lego, you'll know that circular things are pretty hard to do, and I'm really happy with this technique here. And moving back out from the Cal Kestis fight, you can see there's a load of Imperials gathering around trying to get some help to that Purge Trooper and trying to take down this Jedi once and for all. These guys over here have scrambled some mortar troopers. They're just setting up a perimeter over here. They're holding their fire for now because they don't want to destroy the sap vats, but I think they might have to open fire in a minute if he continues to wreak havoc on the base. Here we have a small Easter egg where there's this stormtrooper looking into this hole right here. Now this is actually the lair for the spider that we see in the game, and if we come down here you can see the actual lair down here. We have a small light that doesn't really work well on camera but looks really good in person, and there's actually a dead Imperial officer in there. Now the final part over here is this small landing platform. We have an Imperial troop transport designed by Imperial Brick Productions, and a couple of scout troopers and stormtroopers scrambling their way out of the sides, ready to join in with the battle. This guy was kind of a special Easter egg trooper that I wanted to make, and it's actually based off the flame troopers that we see taking down those giant spiders in the game. And over here we have another officer leading a couple of troopers, one of which who wields a giant RPG. Other than that, there's one more Easter egg down here, which is this small lightsaber building table that we see in the game and we use to customize our lightsabers. Again, it's pretty hard to get a good light in there, but we can see there's a small table on the side here with a couple of pieces for lightsabers. And that's pretty much all the details across the external sections of this base. It's a giant 8 grey base plate mock, and I think it just looks spectacular here on this big table. Like I mentioned before, we will be removing this top section, and I will be giving you a better look at what the internal section looks like. And so I've stripped out the top section here so we can get a better look quickly inside of here before we finish off this video. You can see basically these are the prison cells. We can see a couple of Wookiees in each one. A Wookiee being escorted into this one here. Another couple of Wookiees in here. You can see other than this one, the other two are both closed with these laser doors. We have a rebel inside of this one as well as an officer monitoring him. And you can see various sort of troops and stuff like that marching along the hallway. This is the entrance section here. We can see a couple of people rushing in and out. And the first of the tables in the Imperial communications room. You can see someone's having a snack at work, which is probably not the best idea when they're currently under attack by Cal Kestis. And over in this small section here, you can see a couple more of those tables, a nice Imperial propaganda poster on the wall, and I'm really happy with the way these tables and control stations came out. And whilst this whole central section is kind of hard to see, I'm really glad I managed to include it into the mock. And I think it came out really nicely with these big sort of Imperial windows on the outside. But yeah, that is my entire Imperial base on Kashyyyk mock, guys. This has been a huge project over the last year, so I'd really appreciate it if you'd leave a like on the video if you enjoyed. Let me know what you thought in the comments. We just hit 60,000 subscribers and we're well on our way to 100,000 subscribers, so hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. And if you enjoyed this mock, you can rewatch the entire series here, or equally you can check out my most recent Lego video over here. And with that being said, I'll see you guys over on those videos. Goodbye.